Hello classmates. John and I thought that this would be a good time to talk about one of our favorite times from our high school years, now that the statute of limitations has expired. We call it the Great Train Caper. We don't remember exactly how the idea originated, but the first thing we needed to do was to get a recording of a train whistle. Now this was the summer of 1963. There was not a lot around in the way of consumer electronics items. Stereophonic sound had just been around for a few years. 8-tracks and cassette players were not quite on the scene yet. However, I did have a tape recorder. John, of course, had a better one, so we used his for the project. Now, we went to Karen's house. She was a year ahead of us, and she lived over on the west side of town, and their property bordered the railroad tracks out there, and it was kind of an isolated area, so it was a good spot for John to set up his recording studio. Just had to run a long extension cord to the house for power, and we got set up about the time the train was scheduled to come by. Now, we needed to be sure that the train would blow its whistle as it came by the spot where John was with the tape recorder. So I got down on the tracks about, I don't know, 100 yards down the tracks or so, and stood there, not beside the tracks, but right in the middle of the tracks with my back towards the where the train was going to be coming from. Now this could have ended badly. It's not a well-known fact, but when you're walking down the railroad tracks with your back towards the train, it's a little bit difficult to tell how far away the train is. But at any rate, the train eventually did come around, and as it passed by the spot where John was with the recorder, he was a little bit concerned, and you can hear him yell on the tape, "Dave!" as the train went by. And about that time I turned around to see how far away the train was, and it was closer than I thought it was going to be. So I hopped off the tracks, and the train went by, and all was well, and we got a great recording of the train going by. Now, amazingly enough, after 50 years, John was able to dig up the recording that we made of that train. And I think I hear it coming. Yep, that was it. Okay, now we had the recording of the train, and it was time to go to phase 2. There is a little railroad crossing just past the Kilty, the road that comes up from Oconomowoc Lake. I think it's Gifford Road, and goes up past Oconomowoc Golf Course. There's a railroad crossing there. I don't think it's changed all that much over the years. I think there might be a gate there now. It used to be one of these swinging lights. I think they call them wigwag lights at that crossing. And I don't know how it works now, but back in those days you could activate a train signal by shorting out the tracks in that area and pretending you're a train. So at that railroad crossing, it just so happened that Randy lived in the house right there at that crossing, so we had a power source there. And when we were scouting it out, I think it was a bit of divine providence, because I didn't even have to buy a wire or anything. There was a strip of metal that happened to be lying there by the tracks, which all I had to do was lay down on the tracks with my hands holding the metal against one track and my feet holding the metal against the other track, and that would activate the signal light. So we got set up over there one night. We had a couple of big speakers. John had one, I guess, and I had one. I guess they were 15-inch speakers or something like that. So John set up his amplifier and tape recorder in the weeds by the road, and we had one speaker on one side of the road where it crossed the tracks and another speaker on the other side of the road where it crossed the tracks, so we could have a stereo effect. And this was nighttime, of course, and we were trying to be careful. And John was crouched there in the weeds next to the road, and he would watch for cars coming up from the lake towards the railroad tracks. And I was down the tracks a ways, lying down, ready to activate the railroad signal. When he signaled me, he had a flashlight, and when he saw a car coming up the road, he would signal me, and I would start the train signal going, and the car would come up the road and stop, and John would start the train. And he could control the balance switch, the balance control on his amplifier, so the train would go from one side to the other as the car was sitting there with the railroad signal going. And then after the train went by, the signal would stop, and the car would go across the tracks. So we had a lot of fun with this. As cars were coming up, they would stop for the signal, and the invisible train would go by, and then they'd proceed on their way. And you know, it was all great. And then a guy came up, and I started the signals, and he got up to the railroad tracks. Turns out it was a motorcycle, a guy on a motorcycle. So he's on his bike there, and he hears the train go by, and you know, eventually takes off, and we thought that was great, except that a few minutes later he came back with a police car. And so we're all scrunched down and not moving, and fortunately for us, the police officer did not get out and look around at all, because if he had, he would have found a couple of kids lying around there, and wires and stereo equipment and stuff. So we were lucky that we didn't get caught, but you know, we packed up after that and got out of the area, but we had to wonder to ourselves, would have loved to have heard the conversation between that biker and the cop, you know, telling him, well, you know, I saw the signal light going, so I stopped for the train, and I heard the train go by, but I didn't see it. So, so I don't know whatever happened between those two, but that was the end of the great train caper, and it was one of our fond memories, and we had a great time. I hope you enjoyed the story.